Hello. So if you're new to this, essentially what I do is I stream on Saturday mornings, Saturday for me, and I talk about a particular topic that everybody votes for. And so today, the voted for topic was vaccines. So we're going to talk about all of the science behind vaccines, including the stuff with anti-vaxxers, which can be very problematic. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Wow, you guys like the new intro? Gonna go for it, made it for me. So follow him on Twitter. He's been very kind to make some things for me here and there, so that's pretty exciting. So today we are talking about the science of vaccines. And if you haven't checked out my new website, scientistmel.com, you can go there and access all of my slides. They're all posted there for you to go and do further research if you like. So let's get started. So the first thing we have to talk about is what exactly is the immune system. The immune system is made up of all kinds of cells, but the cells that we're going to focus on today are the T cells, the B cells, natural killer cells, and macrophages. All right, so macrophages, you might have seen videos of these things. They go through and they're just like Pac-Man eater things. They go and they find like a foreign body and then they eat it, and then the thing dies on the inside, and then and all of it attacks the thing with enzymes on the inside. And then eventually, like if you have like a skin cut or something that gets infected, the pus, that's these macrophages that are dead. So they went and ate all the nasty, yucky stuff, and then they die, and then that yellowish, greenish stuff is actually dead macrophages. So they're the eaters that are the thing. That's your first immune response. Now we have antibodies, which are like the B cells. They attack antigens. So sometimes macrophages can leave antigens behind. Well, these antibodies attach to them and kind of target them, so that way the macrophages and can go in and eat them up as well. Sometimes they tag them that way. Now we have T lymphocytes, which are T cells, and we have natural killer cells. These are our assassin cells. You might have heard them called that before, where they go through and they find an already affected cell, and then they go and they institute apoptosis. That's the programmed cellular death. Now the thing is how those particular cells work. If they're able to communicate with the cell, then they're like, hey, this cell is not infected. It's okay. But if they're not able to properly communicate with the cell, that's how it knows, I gotta pop a cap in this one. And so these are our natural killer cells, our T cells that attack already infected cells. So we have to understand a little bit about the immune system before we go further. Now you have two different responses in your immune system. Your first defense is your innate. All right, that's the macrophages, the ones that eat anything. It's not specific. So, for instance, if you have allergies, your innate system is going in. It's like, we see pollen. Well, pollen has got protein on the outside of it, and those particular antigens start freaking out all of your macrophages, and then you get all the snotty stuff, and you're like, what the heck is this? I'm not really sick, it's my allergies. Well, that's your innate. All right, that's your first defense. It's activated when there's a foreign protein in your body in the form of an antigen. Macrophages, T cells, and natural killer cells are part of that. All right, now let's go to adapted. Adaptive is specific. All right, they look for specific antigens. It's your second line of defense. And what it does is it generates kind of like this army of immune cells. And they also have memory cells. So they make an excessive amount of antibodies and they just store them for later, right? You know, they have these B cells that remember how to make these antibodies. And so that's what they do. They work in coordination with T cells as well to be able to target problematic viruses. You know, viruses, you know, they have those little antigens, so your antibodies attack to it and target it, so that way your T cells can go in and go, I got this, and put a cap in it. All right, you following me so far? I hope so. So here, I'm going to switch to this so you can see it a bit better. It's kind of where these cells lie. So on the right, we have our adaptive immunity. It's the one where we have our highly specified antibodies that are made to fit on a particular antigen, all right? And we have on the left our innate immunity. That's the one where it's the initial response. We're like, oh my gosh, it's an antigen, let's eat it. And so we have our macrophages that go in and they eat the things, and that also works in coordination with the natural killer cells. That's just kind of like a Venn diagram. And the T cells and the natural killer cells kind of work in coordination with that. So let's look a little bit about this specific response. So when you get first exposure to a particular virus, we'll say it's a virus in this case, what you have is your B cells recognize that there's a foreign body and they're like, oh my gosh, we have to make all of these antibodies. So it takes a little while for them to build up enough antibodies to target all of those antigens on that virus, all of those proteins on the outside of the virus. And so what happens is you have this huge antibody response. And then you start to have, you know, a decline in your infection. So what happens then is because you have all of these memory cells, you get infected again. Let's say you get infected again right here. You already have all these memory cells. So it's a lot shorter time span for you to actually get better. And so the next time you get infected, hey, guess what? You're going to have like almost no problem whatsoever, and you're not actually going to be affected by any particular disease involving that virus. And so that's kind of how the antibody type of situation works. So let's, if you have any questions, do ask me. So let's talk a little bit about if we incorporate vaccines into that. So we already know if there's antigens, particular proteins that are on the outside of a virus, B cells are like, oh my gosh, we're being invaded, and they make antibodies, all right? And then those antibodies target those particular viruses, all right? And then your T cells go in and go, boom, we got this. That's kind of how it works. They kill off and handle it. There's a lot of other technical terms, but I'm trying to not use them too much. I should do an entire episode just on immunity so we can get into more of the technical terms, but I kind of want to keep it basic in case people get lost. All right, so let's talk about how vaccines work, all right? What they do is they imitate this type of infection. And so you have these antigens that are associated with a virus, or, well, I'm going to get into the various things we can vaccinate against, but virus, we'll go with that for now. So you have these antigens, these proteins that are associated with the virus. We inject that into a person. Your B cells are like, oh my God, we're being invaded. And then they start making antibodies, all right? And then they're able to attach to those viruses and the T cells take them out. That's exactly what vaccines do, except they don't cause the infection. These are inactivated viruses. Sometimes they're alive, attenuated. I'm going to talk about the differences here in a bit, but they don't cause infection. They don't. If you get sick after you've had a flu shot, you were already exposed to the flu virus, or you got exposed shortly after you had your vaccination. You can still get sick, and not have symptoms show up until later, and you can get infected, but it has nothing to do with the vaccine. So once you get vaccinated, you have these T cells, you have these antibodies that all recognize this particular virus. And you're like, hey guys, we got this. If we ever see this again, we can totally take it out like in a day or two. So that's essentially kind of how vaccines work. They simulate an infection without actually causing an infection. All right, so I have another chart here, all right, and we're going to talk about the difference between your primary immune response, which is the macrophages that eat the things and they turn into the pus and stuff like that. So that's kind of like what the primary immune response is. It's slow to build up and it's not very strong. All right, so if we get vaccinated, what happens is we get exposed to that particular virus. We don't really feel any infection. Time, passes. We still got memory cells. Now, if we get exposed to that infection, all of a sudden we have a huge jump in antibodies and it takes it out very quickly. Normally, if you're infected with a virus that your body has never seen before, it can take a very long time for your body to develop a lot of antibodies to be able to take out the virus. Because a virus can replicate itself pretty rapidly, but until your immune system starts making antibodies, if they don't already have them in reserve, it can take a very long time to kind of take out that virus. That's why people who get the flu are sick for a long time, because they're sick for like a week, because it takes a long time to develop those antibodies in order to fight off the virus. That's why we need vaccination, because these viruses, especially like with polio and other types of diseases, they can leave permanent damage while your body's trying to develop antibodies. There's a lot of horrible things that can happen if you're infected with a particular virus while you're trying to build up a natural immunity. If you're vaccinated, you already have those in the stores, so you don't have a long time to develop these antibodies. They're just like, boom, we already know what's going on and we're going to take out this virus. That's why people don't get sick with the measles so often anymore, because we've been vaccinated. We have all of these antibodies there in reserves, and our body knows how to fight the disease. They don't have to build up stores. They're already there. So that's why vaccines are, pretty effective. And that's what this little second hump is here. They're like, okay, we already know how to fight this disease, and boom, we got all these antibodies to take it out. That's essentially what it does. Now let's talk about the types of vaccines. There are several types of vaccines, and I was talking about this in a little bit. We have live attenuated. Those are weakened versions of the virus, okay? Very, very weak versions, just enough for your body to kind of recognize and start to develop viruses. People who have immunosuppression, so those with autoimmune diseases, or those who are HIV positive, people under chemotherapy, they don't need to take live attenuated because it can cause complications. This is where you talk to your doctor about which vaccines are right for you. So now let's talk about inactivated. This is the most common version of a vaccine. So you'll have an inactivated version of a particular virus, and it's inactivated during the process of vaccination. It starts out live, and then they remove a couple things that cause it to not be disease-inducing. So there may be certain proteins, certain enzymes that they're able to remove so it doesn't cause any kind of infection. It's inactivated. All right. This is the most common form of vaccinations that we get. Now, we need to talk about toxoids. See, vaccines not only help us in regards to viruses, they also help us and prevent diseases associated with toxins that are caused by bacteria. Your tetanus shot. You have to get a tetanus shot once every 10 years because vaccines can wear off. And the ones associated with toxoids, they can indeed wear off. And it's about a 10-year span. So these particular vaccines help prevent certain types of diseases associated with toxins that are produced by bacteria. Tetanus, when you step on a nasty nail, that sort of thing, and it punctures your skin. Have you had your tetanus shot? If not, gotta go get one right away. That's one of those things. Now, subunits. This is I'm probably getting into some areas where this is new to a lot of individuals. Subunits. This is a form of virus or bacteria associated types of vaccinations where you only have parts of the germ, parts of the virus, but not the whole thing. This helps minimize side effects. So there are versions of vaccines that have minimal side effects, especially if your family has a history of reaction to vaccines. You can have a subunit version of a vaccine where it's just the antigens that are associated with the disease. Your B cells will recognize it, make antibodies associated with it, and there you still have immunity. So if you have a family history where you have horrendous side effects with vaccines that are not allergy related, subunits are an option. And one in the DTaP, in the pertussis, which is the whooping cough, they use subunits in that particular vaccination. All right, conjugate. Conjugate is a form that some people may not be familiar with. Conjugate means this is for bacteria that have a sugary coating on the outside. So it's a bit harder to kind of take it out with a normal type of vaccine. So this sugary coating is a polysaccharide, and it has antigens on the outside of it. So this conjugate type of vaccine helps make it easier to attach to the outside of that bacteria. So it addresses that coating, and that's associated with the HIV, B as in boy, influenza vaccine. So that's a conjugate vaccine. All right. And I'll give you all of my sources and all my links where you can check it out. So let's talk about multi-doses. So a lot of different vaccines require multiple doses, and there's lots of reasons for that. Sometimes, and usually we find with the inactivated viruses, the first dose doesn't induce enough immune response. And so sometimes you need multiple doses. That's why babies get multiple shots, because they have to be exposed to that antigen a bit more to have a desired good response in order to build up enough antibodies. And then I mentioned the toxoid immunity in regards to tetanus. It can wear off, and that's usually made out of the subunits. So after about 10 years or so, depending on your vaccine, at least with tetanus, you need a new booster shot. That's what we call the booster shots. And also they find, a lot of different vaccines, especially with HPV and hepatitis, they require multiple doses in order to get the best immune response. And then lastly, some of these little buggers evolve. Who'd have thought? Evolution's a real thing, especially with the flu. So the flu virus evolves, and there are various strains of the flu virus. And so healthcare professionals and researchers have to kind of predict which particular flu virus is going to be prevalent in a given area, and they're getting pretty good at it. And so that's why you have to get a flu virus shot every single year, because it changes. The flu virus evolves, and different strains do different things, and it's not the same every year, because the outside of those little proteins, those little antigens, change, and since they change, we have to get a new flu shot. All right, let's talk about the side effects, because everybody's so scared about side effects. Most side effects are mild. Sometimes they're associated with simple cold symptoms. They only last for a day or two at best. Redness, itchy, sometimes a fever. It largely depends on the type of vaccine that you're getting. And there's all kinds of information on the CDC website where you can go to see what the side effects are and the incidence of them. The most common on all of them is redness and itchiness. You're like, oh my God, I got a shot. It's all itchy and it's kind of red and it's a little bit warm. That's the fever, redness, itchy. Usually if you take Tylenol before you go and get a vaccine, that'll handle the redness and the itchy and any swelling, because it's an anti-inflammatory. Life-threatening ones are exceedingly rare. They're very rare, and that's where you talk to your doctor. If you have any allergies to eggs, any allergies to certain proteins, food allergies, if you have any history of a bad response in your family. And then if you're really scared, you can ask for a subunit version to minimize any particular types of reactions to a vaccine. So there are options, but you have to talk to your doctor about it. Now, if you have an immune disease, if you're immunosuppressed or have cancer and on chemotherapy, you have to talk to your doctor about vaccinations because that can cause you issues. And that's why, talk to your doctor. People are so afraid to talk to their doctor. Just tell your doctor what's going on so they can make informed decisions on what's your best line of care, especially in prevention involving vaccines. All right, so let's talk about what would happen if we stopped vaccinating people. It'd be pretty awful, if I'm honest. All right, so what if we stop vaccinating? What exactly would happen? All right, so I have a nice little infographic here brought to us by the CDC. The people in red are sick and infected. The people in blue are healthy and not vaccinated, and the people in yellow are healthy and vaccinated. So if only some people get vaccinated, then the virus is going to spread. It's going to hop around to different people, and a lot of people are going to get sick, and a lot of people will probably die. That's what happens if we stop vaccinating, all right? Healthy vaccinated, they live on and get to pass their genes on to their kids and get their kids vaccinated, and their kids are probably going to do just fine, and then they're going to give their kids vaccinations, and those healthy vaccinated people are going to kind of win out. But still, we don't want all of this loss of life over something that's preventable, right? That's kind of just, that seems wrong, especially when we can stop it. All right, so if most people get vaccinated, so here we got our sick dude again in the middle. Let's say he has, I don't know, polio, maybe something, or smallpox, or, that'd be kind of weird because we've eradicated those due to vaccines. But if we have like a dude here who's sick, and most of the people are healthy and vaccinated, then that means they're not going to get sick. And the healthy non-vaccinated people, they are less likely to get ill. So it's kind of like what we call herd immunity. A lot of people are going to be fine, and it's going to be okay, and we're all not dying of horrible things that are preventable now. So that's why we need to kind of continue vaccination, because honestly, healthcare is going to skyrocket if we don't. If we think about it that way, all of the treatments that we would have to do for the people who are sick and all the medicines they'd have to pay for, it honestly probably is better for your pocketbook if you vaccinate, because if you get one of these diseases and you're going to be looking at costly healthcare treatments, you're possibly looking at funeral services, depending on how serious the illness is that they get. So it's much more. If you're just looking at, forget the fact that you have loved ones that are suffering from preventable diseases. If you look at it from the pocketbook standpoint, you're going to be paying a lot more money to treat somebody with a preventable disease. And they'll possibly die from it, depending on how serious the disease is. And you have funeral costs. So if you're even taking the humanity element out of it, if you don't vaccinate people, it's going to cost you more money. And it's going to also raise insurance premiums for everybody else. So, vaccination is inexpensive. The CDC has programs to vaccinate your kids for free. There's absolutely no reason to not vaccinate your children. I don't understand it. Okay, so let's talk about statistics. That was a segue. But I'm trying to show you the benefits of vaccination in all forms, because we're people. We need to take care of people firstly and mostly, and then it will become costly if you don't. So even if you don't care about people, you should. A lot of people just care about money. Maybe that'll be a kicker for them. So I don't know. Anyway, let's talk about the vaccine statistics. All right, disease rates are exceedingly low in the U.S. due to vaccination. Now, in 1921, 15,000 Americans died of diphtheria. 15,000 people died of diphtheria in 1921. And rubella, which is what we call the German measles, in 1964 to 1965 killed 2,000 babies and caused 11,000 miscarriages. All right. Rubella, German measles, killed 2,000 babies in 1964 and 1965. Most doctors in the U.S. never see a case of the measles. They don't. And there are many pediatricians and many doctors who will not see your children if they haven't been vaccinated. And that's because they don't want the infants that come to their office to come in contact with anybody who might be carrying the disease. And because we vaccinated so much, polio and smallpox are eradicated in the U.S. Polio, which causes paralysis, horrible disease that causes paralysis, smallpox that causes death, is eradicated in the U.S. now because of vaccines. People don't have to suffer and be paralyzed anymore because of vaccines. Isn't that fantastic? Vaccinate, people, vaccinate. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about something called anti-vaxxers. I get them often. Well, not often. Sometimes they come to me and ask me questions. Let me tell you, they're dangerous. They're actually dangerous. And I know they mean well, and I know they don't realize a lot of things, and they're very scared and they're frightened. So let me just say, vaccines do not cause autism. There are genetic ties to autism. Vaccines don't cause it. They don't. There are no cases of autism that's been induced by vaccines. There was a study that was compiled where 1.2 million children were studied. There are no links to autism in vaccines. 1.2 million children. The largest meta-analysis shows that there is no link to vaccines and autism, all right? Vaccines are safer than suffering a deadly virus. They're just safer. I mean, you might have mild symptoms, but, you know, like any particular medical treatment, you're going to have side effects sometimes. People who don't trust vaccines seem to trust aftercare drugs, but both come from medical science. Yes, you know, it's interesting. They'll trust treatments of polio, but they won't trust vaccines. And I'm going, how can you... I would think preventing the disease by far is the better option, and treating any kind of side effects, running the risk of side effects, which is anything, but even treatments have side effects. So you're going, oh my gosh, it hurts my brain sometimes. I don't understand. So it's like, gosh, vaccines are still safer than suffering these deadly diseases. If your baby gets anything, the measles, mumps, or rubella, your baby will probably die. That's a statistic. Your baby will probably die if they get any combination of those. Rubella, the German measles, killed 2,000 babies in 1965. We know it's deadly, so how about we vaccinate? Vaccine components are safe. There's nothing in a vaccine that's going to cause any inherent harm. People are like, ooh, chemicals. Chemicals is not a bad word. You were made of chemicals. There's toxic. Toxic is the word that you're looking for. Not every single chemical is toxic. You eat chemicals. They're called sugar. They're called fiber. They're called protein. These are chemicals. You have fine chemicals and you have toxic chemicals. There's nothing toxic in a vaccine. Nothing toxic at all. Everything's safe. Okay? So, unvaccinated people, they risk the lives of others, and that's where it's inherently dangerous. It's not like a personal choice where it's just affecting you and nobody else. All right? It's not like going to the tanning bed and subjecting yourself to UV rays, increasing your risk, personal risk of cancer. That's increasing your personal risk. When you don't vaccinate your children and you don't vaccinate yourself, you're running the risk of hurting other people. Okay, that's a choice that they don't get to make. People who are immunosuppressed, they can't get vaccines, or people who have certain food allergies, they cannot get certain vaccines. So unvaccinated people risk the lives of others who don't have that choice. They don't have that choice. So that's kind of where people are like, well, this is my choice. Like, well, is it really your choice? I mean, sure, Yeah, I mean, I guess so. You do have a choice whether or not you get a vaccine, but you're also risking the lives of others. So you need to take that into consideration if you're thinking, I'm not going to vaccinate. Well, you could hurt other people. And so at some point in time, you have to take some kind of personal responsibility with the knowledge of knowing you could prevent a disease. And if you infect another person because you've done that, because you didn't vaccinate yourself, and you got a little baby sick at Disney World, or you have a person who's on chemotherapy who contracts measles because your kid carried it or you carry it, there's personal responsibility there too that you have to take into consideration. And I think a lot of people just don't think about that. So yes, you're risking the lives of other people if you don't vaccinate yourself and your children. That is a fact. All right. And they don't get a choice. They don't get the choice that you get. They cannot get vaccines because it will kill them. That's different. All right. Now we know the difference. Okay. So we're going to wrap this up a little bit. Time to wrap up. What do vaccines do? They are the things that boost immunity, not taking large amounts of vitamin C. Because your body just pees out what it doesn't store, and it doesn't really store vitamin C, just so you know. Don't really need to do that so much, you just get it naturally in your diet. Diseases are eradicated because of vaccines. No polio or smallpox. Woohoo, vaccine! So we don't have those anymore. That's fantastic. Extremely mild symptoms. Correct. Not getting vaccinated is dangerous for many others. Yes, it is. And it's better. I would rather have itchy soreness and go like, ooh, I'm itchy and sore. I got maybe a little bit of a cough, than have the illness itself. I had the flu one time, man. I don't ever want that again. I'd much rather have the mild symptoms, It protects the population. It does not cause autism. Vaccines do not cause autism. They don't. Genetic ties. I can send you those links if you think they do. Multiple doses give the best response. And vaccinate your children. And if you're an adult and you haven't had your tetanus in a while or your DTaP in a while, go do it. Go do it. Make yourself healthy, feel good. Just boost your immunity. Because honestly, I'm going to be honest with you, autism claims are like flat earth claims. They kind of are a little bit. I'm going to be honest with you. Once you get to your mid-30s, your thyroid starts to shrink. So before you hit your 50s, if at all possible, get all your booster shots because your thyroid starts to shrink. And then once that goes down, you get to a certain age when you're elderly, you're just running on memory cells and not making new ones. That is my tip to you guys. Get your vaccinations while you're still in your 30s and 40s and 50s. Even if you're 60, you might still have some thyroid left. If you're 70, 80, keep going. You could still make a few extra B cells, but at some point, your body's going to say, no more B cells. And then all you're doing is running on memory ones. That's hard. And that's why a lot of elderly people get cancer and get sick and stuff because they're immunosuppressed. They're not making any new cells. Vaccinate. All right. Vaccinate. I'm just going to say that over and over and over again. So here we go. Here are all of my sources. Honestly, I looked at more pages, but they were all like the World Health Organization. Am I affiliated with any drug company? I am not. I am not affiliated with any drug company. That is a disclaimer. There's no conflict of interest. I am pro not making people sick. How about that? So CDC has a fantastic website. You can check out the World Health Organization, and Autism Speaks has information on that particular study I mentioned with the 1.2 million children. So here is where I'm going to take a moment to thank my super awesome patrons on my Patreon. I have Tony, somebody who's anonymous, Mark, Jen, Carl, Anthony, Paula, Zachary, Patrick, Tony, Tristan, and Jennifer. Well, thank you. I love my patrons. They start at $1 a month. They get early access to my audio podcast, which is live there. And I do post it on my scientistmail.com website, but they're That's 2 weeks behind. So people on my Patreon account get early access. They also get special rewards, including artwork, prints, as well as exclusive content and videos. And they make this possible for me to do this. And so I do love them. They're lovely and they're nice people and they help me out. You can find me everywhere on the internet, and now scientistmail.com is live, so you can find me on my website there. And if you can't remember all of these links, that's okay. Just go to scientistmail.com and you can find a way to find me. There's my Patreon. It's the same. I'm Scientist Mail everywhere. Just Google that and you can find me somewhere. Oh, you're welcome. I love doing this. This is fun for me. And I'll post a new poll for the topics and stuff. And you guys can vote on what I talk about next Saturday. This has been fab. I love doing this and I love helping you guys and educating the general population. And if you need something more challenging, let me know and I can hit you up with more challenging information in regards to vaccines and immunity. So this has been the science of vaccines. Thank you so much for hopping aboard. And if you joined us a bit late, fear not. All of my videos stay up forever, and I also post them on YouTube. Aww. Squishy science hugs to you guys. You're welcome, and I'll see you guys on Twitter. Holler at me there. Woohoo! Have a great day.